Music. We take it for granted. It's everywhere. But why do we do it? Musicality exists in other animals. Think of birds or cetaceans, which would be things like whales and dolphins, or monkeys. So there must be an ancient primordial reason for it. By now, you've probably seen the video that went viral about 12 years ago, where there was this toddler who was barely one dancing to Beyonce's Single Ladies. It was hilarious and really cute, but also really interesting because this child probably wasn't able to walk, but she could dance. And when the dancers were, moving around, she would lift up one leg and extend the leg out along with the beat. It was super cute. But obviously, this means that music really speaks to us at a very young age. And children, of course, we all know that children will spontaneously start dancing and singing. Why? Why does music play such a big part of our imagination, our fantasy stories, our folk tales? Why is it so closely tied to the human soul and the spirit? What is it really about? Hi, I'm Dr. G. This is The Imaginarium. I'm a psychiatrist and fantasy author, and here we talk about all the ways that mental health connect with dreams, fantasy fiction, folk tales. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Really helps the channel grow. And you can check out my website too for newsletters, podcasts, stuff like that. So what is music really about? Today, I'm going to get into this fascinating subject primarily by referring to two papers with the links below that look at the evolutionary and anthropological origins of music in humans so that we can get a handle on what the point of it is and why it's so powerful and emotionally mesmerizing. The first paper is by Schruth and colleagues, 2022, in the American Journal of Biological Anthropology. And then the other one is Clark et al. In 2024, Hominin Musical Production, Paleoecological Contexts, and Self-Domestication in the Anthropological Review. Dense stuff, but I'm here to make things simple and break it down for you guys. Music is a huge part of the imaginal and the fantastical. Oftentimes, it's equated with magic in and of itself in stories. In Tolkien, for example, the world is sung into existence by the supreme god. Songs mesmerize. They can cause men to go mad and women to fall in love, or vice versa. They can change the world and they can even kill you in stories. But why is this? Is this just all just wild, fanciful nonsense, or is there something more profound and real going on here that these stories are reflecting on? Well, this is me, so I'm going to find out. Anyway, these papers are very dense here, but luckily I'm here to help break it down for you. Think of this, or picture it, the Miocene, 20 million years ago. During that time in Africa, the climate was different, and there were quite a few apes which were predating to the common ancestor of chimpanzees and humans. They were arboreal. They lived in closed forested habitats. This was before big climate change changed the overall look of Africa, and it was very heavily forested. So anthropologists think that these apes were probably quite musical, much like modern arboreal apes are, and monkeys. Why? Well, this is because across the animal kingdom, there is an interesting link between complex three-dimensional habitats like forests and oceans that encourages musical behavior. Think of whale song or penguins who have to navigate complicated ice layers, and they also have very complex songs. And then, of course, you've got songbirds. But why is this? Well, as it turns out, these kind of environments tend to, especially in forest environments, they obstruct line of sight and they reduce the importance of vision and smell as a result in communication. So auditory communication becomes more important. Also, there's a whole lot of connection between vocal motor control areas of brains of mammals and other animals that co-develop with visuospatial coordination and control. So what does that mean? It means that the ability to utter complex vocal displays shows and displays into the environment to potential mates. It shows to potential mates that you're healthy and highly skilled cognitively. Okay? It's capable of acrobatic feats of locomotion. In other words, potential mates out there and others in the species can get a sense of how cognitively advanced you are from those vocalization and vocal displays. So because of this, sexual selection pressures will move the species towards not only more complex vocal display ability, but the cognitive ability to assess such displays. In other words, we're talking here about the origins of a music appreciation abilities. For all of you neuroscience nerds out there like myself, this develops along the mesolimbic pathway, interestingly enough. So very deep in the brain. So this is stuff that is across multiple species and shared by many, many, many animals. One interesting finding in this research is that pro-musicality correlates very strongly with monogamous pair bonding. That's another thing you might not necessarily make the connection. Well, why is that? And the reason probably has to do with the time required to acquire such complicated cognitive and vocal abilities. This would mean, and that's time required in comparison to the lifespan of the animal. This means that long-term pair bonding assists in the advantage to learn it and or teach it. Songbirds tend to, of course, make monogamous pairs. We even talk about them as lovebirds, right? There's a good reason for that. But let's just marinate on that fact for a second. Essentially, this is saying that music travels with love. Interesting. Maybe not surprising, but now we maybe understand why. So back to the Miocene, we have the apes that predate humans and chimpanzees. Therefore, because they were arboreal, were very likely musical and monogamous for this reason. But as the climate changed and habitats became more open, less forest, plains and savannas, some of these hominids spread beyond the forest. And some of them, like the ancestor of humans and chimpanzees, developed into more chimpanzee-like animals, which traveled by way of knuckle walking out into the environment. Now, chimpanzees seem to have lost the musicality of their ancestors from this point of view, along with all the other still existing hominids. One hominin, Ardipithecus ramidus, however, did not. This species of hominin lived about 4 million years ago, and it was both bipedal and climbing. It evolved into Australopithecus, which retained its bipedal locomotion and later evolved into Homo sapiens. Now, here's the interesting thing. Of all the existing hominids, only humans still sing. Chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas, they're not all that musical. So what makes humans so different? Why are we the only terrestrial hominid that still sings and dances so much? Well, one possibility is that we retained the need for it, even though we no longer lived in purely arboreal habitats, because of the importance of throwing and high dexterity tool use in food processing that remained important to our ancestors even after Ardipithecus ramidus. In other words, it's because we're bipedal, unlike our other terrestrial and non-musical cousins. But because of that, we retained a need for the same complex cognitive abilities that undergird musical behavior. Other hominids are very strong, but they can't throw for crap compared to humans. Now, consider the incredible advantage that this gives. The ability to throw a spear 50 yards and kill something at that tremendous distance is something no other animal can really do. And this is one of the earliest technological advantages that we had in the hominin lineage. Another advantage that not talked about as much as this is the food processing advantage. Because we have complex language capabilities and the ability to pass on information, many of our advantages likely continued because of the ability that we have to process foods that other animals can't get at, because it takes so much work. We have to pull it up out of the ground, we have to beat it with sticks and tools, and we have to go through all of these other rigmaroles to get the food, but then we have a food source that other animals don't have. So that kept that type of behavior relevant to the species as we continued through evolution. But this means that music is likely to be much older than humans, possibly 10 million years old, which means we sang long before we ever spoke. as a continuation of various hominin species. And consider that even modern humans with speech impediments or stroke damage, oftentimes the ability to sing is spared, even if they can't talk. Well, this might be why, because it came later and involving different brain areas. Now, in folk tales, singing is often equated with beauty and high mate value. The prince will sing into the forest to attract a princess, or vice versa. Elves and fairy creatures singing in the forest entrance nearby mortals, drawing them to their doom or their bliss. In the fantasy novel that I wrote, King of the Forgotten Darkness, I make mention of a race of beings called Lyrvians, tree humanoids like dryads or ents, say, who have unmatched musical ability. Now, a funny thing about that is I created this idea many, many years ago without having any knowledge between the connections of music, forests, and love, or emotional expression, and even sexuality. It was just a natural thing that came about. Maybe this is why, because it's part of our heritage. Long before Homo sapiens, it's part of the hominin heritage. Interestingly enough, there is also a collection of traits in the hominids that connect music and prosociality. Across the hominids, both extinct and living, many species have large canines, sexual dimorphism, meaning the males are much bigger than the females, for quadrupedal movement, and polygamous couplings. An example of this would be chimpanzees and bonobos, our closest relatives that are still alive. Also in these types of hominids, there is a lot of in-group competition. But these are the ones that are not musical, remember. On the other hand, smaller canines, these teeth, less sexual dimorphism, bipedal locomotion, monogamous pair bonding, and low in-group competition, along with high prosocial coherence and behaviors, all travel with musicality. Isn't that interesting? Even more interesting is that these characteristics predate the large-brained hominins. In other words, music and the connection between love and sociality are much older than humans. But as our ancestors' brains continued to expand through the hominin lineage, and the lifestyle did not lose these features, unlike the other ones that lost their musicality and their prosociality, our ancestors leaned into it, using the musicality and dance to transmit knowledge and hunting, or social rituals that presage mating. These are things we see in all indigenous cultures worldwide. This is probably why. So music then seems to be a universal symbol then, not just in humans, but in all animals. A symbol of love, forest, belonging, safety, knowledge, emotional expression, culture, practically everything that's human. So just think about that the next time you hear a song. Catch you next time.